Section 7. Hume's Footnote. It is time to sum up. Hume observes that his theory of property is much the same as Grotius. In this chapter it has been argued that there is no bar and substantial support for accepting his claim, and therefore for recognizing his theory as a contribution to the modern theory of natural law. This conclusion is not debarred by the familiar figures of Hume the Newtonian or Hume the skeptic. And the doctrine of the artificiality of justice, which may also be thought an implicit rejection of natural law, is in fact an attempt to solve a problem created by grafting the moral sense account of the psychology of action on the natural law account of the origins of justice and social order. In other respects, his account of justice conforms with the main aims of the 17th century natural law theories, stressing that the system of justice is both adventitious and necessary, arising steadily over time as circumstances require, and arising necessarily because it is the only secure foundation for the successful regulation of human social life. Hume explicitly acknowledges Grotius, but it was pointed out at the beginning that he may have meant Grotius in particular, or the tradition of modern natural law, or both. It is now possible to offer a brief resolution of that issue. The theory of justice, as an account of the necessary development over time of an adventitious rule for the regulation of human society, the theory that justice is a dictate of right reason, is common to the tradition of modern natural law as a whole, and is so because it is a defining characteristic even of ancient natural law. The other determining factor identified above, the influence of theories of the psychology of action, including moral action, is, in sharp contrast, a late development. It is best understood as part of the new experimental philosophy of nature, being an attempt to explain human action in terms of efficient causes. It is not considered by Grotius, and neither does Pufendorf devote much attention to it. His strong concern with developing a moral science is with the attempt to provide a systematic account of morals, not with its efficient causes. It is towards the end of the 17th century that experimental or Newtonian ambitions are grafted on to a natural jurisprudence, and the theory of moral sense is then developed in order to overcome an important tension in that alliance. In these two respects, then, Hume's debts are, firstly, to an essential feature of any natural law theory, established long before Grotius or Pufendorf, and, secondly, to subsequent extensions of the traditional doctrines, extensions which owed much to Locke and Hutcheson. His other debts, however, can be spelt out in terms of Pufendorfian or Grotian features. The debts to Pufendorf are the less substantial. In the first place, Hume takes up Pufendorf's distinction between the different senses of natural in order to include virtues produced by human artifice within a general theory of natural law. Secondly, following Hutcheson, he restricts the realm of natural law to intrinsic or material obligations, and by combining this with an insistence on explanation in terms of efficient causes, makes the problem of motivation central to his theory in the treatise. Thirdly, his view reflects Pufendorf's reformulation of the foundation of natural law, in which the contrast between human nature and utility is overcome. Hume's appeals to utility are always to rational or genuine utility, never to mere expediency, and so the practical part of his treatise on human nature is simultaneously a theory of utility. Hume's debts to Grotius are not more numerous, but run more deeply. Firstly, his frequent insistence on the limitations on our natural benevolence, for example, that it is far too weak to serve as a foundation for the system of justice, is a return to a more limited conception of the nature of human sociability, and thus to a position not unlike Grotius's. He clearly believes that the more refined tempers come to possess more extensive social affections than the vulgar, but accepts that sociability requires only a very limited benevolence. He therefore accepts a baseline of social affections and corresponding interdependence considerably more narrow than Pufendorf's stipulation that sociability requires the performance of beneficial actions, such that each of us are glad that there are others of our kind. Secondly, and most importantly, Hume accepts Grotius' Etiasmi daremus passage with all its implications for a fully secular social theory. In coming to appreciate these implications to the fullest, he may have been influenced by Pierre Bayle, whose defense of the possibility of a society of speculative atheists owed much to Grotius. It should not be forgotten that a secular social theory is not implicit atheism, not even practical atheism. The pivotal issue is whether a complete account of moral obligation is possible without reference to a divine legislator, and Hume's answer is unequivocally in the affirmative. He sees no need for a formal element in moral obligation, instead founding human society entirely on the social affections and common reasonings of ordinary life. He describes his theory as the same as that hinted at by Grotius, and it is reasonable to take this to indicate a background feature of Grotius' work, rather than any detailed discussion of more specific issues of law and justice in the body of De Jure Belli ac Pagis. If this seems reasonable, the Etiasmi daremus passage, with the accompanying introductory discussion of the foundations of natural law in the Prolegamenon, to that massive work, appears to fit the bill. Perhaps it is also noteworthy that the remark occurs in the second inquiry, a work in which the earlier preoccupation with the sources of moral motivation has been considerably trimmed, thereby bringing into clearer focus the theory's broadly secular and utilitarian character. In the abstract, Hume claims that, if anything can entitle the author to so glorious a name as that of an inventor, 'tis the use he makes of the principle of the association of ideas, which enters into most of his philosophy. This is an appropriate note on which to conclude, since it illustrates the centrality of Hume's psychological concerns. In both the treatise where he describes his account of property as an account of the development of a law of nature, and in the second inquiry, where he acknowledges the debt to Grotius from which the study began, Hume clearly signals a debt to the main strands of modern natural law. If these claims have proven hard to accept, one principal reason is the extent to which his account of the psychological mechanisms at the very center of the citadel of human nature has shaped his work, and obscured some of its affinities. Hume's aim is not to replace natural law, but to complete it, by calling on the powerful resources of the new experimental philosophy. He aims to ground moral obligations firmly in the soil of human nature itself, in the natural workings of the human mind, and thereby fulfill the bold ambitions of the theory of natural law.